All right, time to start work on this 49 Epiphone Zephyr. I've got the new variable resistor, nice 50 watt, won't be stressed by the voltages present. The old one was soldered to these terminals, and that's a weak connection, and it broke. And I cannot put the old one where this one is because, I cannot put the new one where the old one was, and the new one needs to be screwed in to have these correct mounts. And while I could screw one here to this panel, which just plugs a hole on the other side, here I've got a transformer on the other side. So no screws there. And I looked around at various places I might be able to get it. There's a transformer there that blocks that. I think the best solution will be for me to mount it right here, up a bit, so that the screw here cannot, which has high voltage on it, will not contact this transformer screw. This will require 2 small holes to be drilled in the back panel to secure it. I think that's well worth it. I don't think that any collector would say, oh my gosh, that's non-original. I mean, the amp is full of non-original components. The circuit and the transformers are the important thing, and that old Alnico speaker certainly won't hurt. But to do this, I need to get this one out of the way. I'm going to get this one out too, just for completion's sake. So I've got my big chassis iron heated up. And we see, got a jumble of wires and cables from mics and soldering stuff. The trouble I'm running into here is that what it's soldered to conducts heat very well and then sinks it into the steel chassis. So this one should be a little bit easier. Old solder doesn't always want to flow. Sometimes I have to add a little bit fresh just to get that flux in there, but there he goes. Just kind of neaten that up a little bit so it looks less like a deformity on the chassis. All right, I'm now done with the big chassis iron. Unplug that so I don't touch it 10 minutes from now and forget that it's on, and then I hurt for a week. All right, so now I'm going to put a piece of masking tape, painter's tape, on the outside here and mark my line. I'll show you that before I drill. All right, I use my speed square to get, I roughed in the distance just between the two of these laying up against and just put a little mark there. Then I use my speed square to get perpendicular line to the bottom edge of the chassis, and then up a 1/2 inch on both sides, and that will place it exactly where I want it to be without touching anything it ought not. I'll confirm that from the other side before I drill, but I'm pretty sure I'm good here. And at that point, I'm ready to drill. I may need to shorten this screw. It looks like an 8x32. If that's the case, I can just use a shorter screw rather than cut this one off. I just don't have any chance of this touching anything on the other side. So let me confirm that real fast. Nah, everything will be cool right here. So let me drill those out and deburr them, and I'll be ready to mount these with some new good quality hardware. All right, each one now has number 6x32 stainless machine screw with a compression washer there, and then a nylock nut on the other side. And that's not going to go anywhere ever. And the resistor is held securely in place. Now I need to reconnect 2 connections on this. One, there are only 2 connections used. It's used as a variable resistor, not as a pot. And I'm going to connect one to this red wire coming from the rectifier tube, and one to this red wire which goes to the first filter stage. And then I will adjust that. I should have 400 volts at this connection when it's adjusted correctly per this schematic. So let me do that, and then we'll see how it be sounding. Well, the power is up, and it's no longer blowing fuses, obviously, but it's got a lot of noises, including some weird noises. It almost sounds like I've got the cell phone too close to it, but the cell phone's in airplane mode, but it's a timed thing like a capacitor. I was hoping that this was, since this amp had extensive service in the not too distant past, that there'd be very few issues here once I replaced that damaged resistor. And it's certainly not blowing fuses anymore. Also, the schematic said to adjust this variable resistor until there was 400 volts at the filter cap. There's nowhere near 400 volts. It's like 380, 375 at the rectifier. So that voltage drop across that resistor is really not that necessary at this point. But whatever's throwing the sound off may be throwing off the voltages as well. So there's some next level to this onion beyond the obvious one. Let's see what it sounds like, though. I'm going into the guitar channel, I think. Got some dirty pots. Let's see if what those input jacks gains are like. This is the first one. Some dirty jacks. Not hearing much, if any, gain difference between those jacks. Let's try the vibrato channel. That background chattery sound is not affected by the channel volumes. I suspect it's in the output. All right, that's the vibrato channel. It's very dark. What are these controls called? We've got speed and intensity and just volume. So that microphone input very well might have an input impedance that really is for microphones. The speed pot works backwards on this, so clockwise is slower. Now that is the microphone input. Let me see if that vibrato is global, or is it just on the mic input? All right, so that vibrato, the tremolo, is in the output. It's going to be on both channels. Now this is the amp on 10. Still not sounding that great. But aside from a very slight hum in that channel and the dirty pots and jacks, it doesn't make the louder or quieter. So let me power this off, and I'm gonna put the chassis back where it would normally be in normal operation, just in case it's a wire proximity thing. This Epiphone, like a lot of amps from this period that separate the controls from the main chassis down below, is passing AC all the way up from this stuff to the preamp. That's where the power switch is, and sometimes that can introduce all kinds of noises. It happens in Leslie circuits as well. So let me see if there's any change once I move that to where it's supposed to be in its regular playing condition. Well, lo and behold, that chatter stuff went to a way in the background level, and now there's a hum that's more apparent. That could be, let me show you what I'm looking at. That could be the position of these wires in relation to each other, because that sound varied when it was on its side versus like this. On odd amps from this period. The one thing you don't want to put up by your input jacks is your AC power connection. And so that's precisely what they do on these early amps. And that hum we're hearing is probably exactly that AC being routed up to the input jacks. If I were the owner of this amp and I wanted to use this amp rather than look at it and say, isn't it lovely, I would have a guy like me disconnect the power switch up there and either add another one here down on the bottom of the chassis, or more realistically, once that AC is not being routed to the top, just plug this into a power outlet that has an on-off switch. So if you want to turn leave the amp plugged into that, flip that switch, the amp turns on, flip that switch, the amp turns off, no drilling. I would just be removing the AC run going up to the input jack, which would hopefully get rid of a lot of stuff. Now there's that hum, and for an amp with two 6L6s, it's extraordinarily low in output. You got a 6SQ7 and a 6SL7. I will play around with those, and then it's got another unknown tube in the back. I need to look at the schematic. Like I said, I was hoping that this was a matter of this just had that bad resistor, and that resistor certainly was bad. But let me see what else is happening with this amp. And again, I'm concerned that the voltages seem to be well off what the schematic says. It could just be misbiased really badly. But the underlying sound is promising enough, so we'll see where this one takes us. Fast add-on to the what I've already shot. Spoke to the owner. He was unaware that this amp had ever had service before. The filter cap in here does not match the schematic at all. And I don't know whether it was changed in like the 70s. I don't see a date code on it. Or whether, Dan Electro, who made this national Valco, was just grabbing what they had on hand. But they did a very strange thing on this. Either whoever recapped it or whoever was building him that week for Valco, this white wire here, which is no longer connected to anything. By the way, you notice if I move my hand here, all that static goes away. That's why I have the lav mic off, so you can't hear, so you can hear all the stuff better. So once this thing is shielded, it'll be much quieter. But this white wire is running to a node on this filter cap, which has 20 microfarads at 25 volts. That's on the positive going to the output transformer, going to the speaker. Without it, it's much louder and more vibrant than with it, so I'll reconnect it real fast. So after speaking to Steve, the owner, it's going to get a new filter cap, and rather than a 4-section with that strange cap on the output transformer secondary, it's just going to have a 3-section. The schematic shows 10, 10, 10. This has 40, 30, 30. 40, 30, 30 makes a lot more sense to me. But between the low voltages present in the amp compared to the schematic, and I've got the volume on 10 right now, and it's got a pair of 6L6s in the output, and it's got a 5879 pentode tube for the first stage. This thing should have a lot more gain than it has. The input jacks from the various channels are also mixed in an odd way where, unless you have the volume up on the guitar channel, the tone is almost non-existent. It's all rolled off, dumped through a 0.1 microfarad cap to ground. on the mic channel. And the volume pot used for the instrument is a 68K audio taper. So that thing has got a very low input impedance. We're losing a lot of signal on highs right there. And it's probably a way they kept it from having too much gain, given the standards of 1949, using that 5879 pentode. But I suspect we may have either a weak pentode or a weak 6SL7. I've got those around handy to try out. Or it could be something in the output. And again, the schematic just shows a 250 ohm cathode resistor for both 6L6s. This one's actually bypassed with a capacitor as well, which should give this more gain than stock, but it just doesn't have much output. It should be, about 20 watts with a pair of 6L6s and cathode bias. But, at least the speaker seems good, and I'm no longer concerned about that chatter that you hear because